evening, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. Welcome to Songwriting Simplified over here at Jonny Lipsham Studios. I'm sorry, it's just me tonight. Jonny has some family business to attend to tonight, so we're giving him the night off. He doesn't get very many nights off, so I figured, why not? So, welcome to, for those of you that haven't seen it, welcome to my new studio in my brand new house. We've been here for just almost a month already. I know it's crazy. It's gone ridiculously fast. But yeah, this is show number 3, I think, in terms of just overall live streams that I've done here in this room. Getting used to it slowly but surely. But yeah, it's got some issues, trust me. One of which is it's incredibly hot in here because in the afternoon the sun shines directly through the window straight into this room. And although I have a temporary blind installed so that I can see my screen, it still gets phenomenally hot in here. It's currently 32 degrees Celsius in here. So it's pretty hot, and I'm trying to figure out ways in which I can keep cool and keep my gear cool. That's the main thing. Eventually I'll have a proper blind installed and we'll have some a little bit of air cooling going on here, hopefully. But for right now, I have to make do with what I got and hope that nothing overheats. So there we go. And I'm going to stop the music right there. Sorry about that. I had to put that on because I was just about to start the show and suddenly realized I need to pee. So I had to just do something, so I quickly pulled up a song and made a dash for it. So there you go. So yes, thank you, Mike. I have turned the loop off now. So anyway, you said loop heaven. It's loop in as much as it was looping, but it isn't really that much of a loop. Some of it is, some of it's loop based, but some of it isn't. Like the Fender Rhodes and the piano was me, and the bass was me, but everything else is loops out of the what was it called? I'm trying to remember what it was called. Oh yeah, if you're a member of Persona Sphere, you will have this. It's called Pride of Kingston. And it was added to Persona Sphere maybe about 3 months ago. And it's got some really nice reggae style loops in there. So you can go and have your pick of those. Actually, the bass part that I ended up playing sounds incredibly like one of the loops. It's just one of those coincidences where I played pretty much exactly what was in the loop without actually hearing the loop first. I was just like, I appear to have copied the loop without knowing what the loop was. So funny how those things work out. But yes, it's from the Pride of Kingston set, which is pretty nifty. It's got some nice loops, including strings, guitars, horns, Hammond organ, and a whole bunch of other things, and synths, all at different tempos. I just particularly like that kind of down tempo one-drop reggae stuff. Of all the reggae music that I like to listen to, that's the kind of style of reggae I like to listen to. So there we go. We got 20 people watching, more or less, I think. Let's go check. Yeah, 21 people. You are 21 of the finest people on the internet right now. I'm going to put that out there. So tonight's show, because I had to kind of rearrange things a little bit at the last minute, because we weren't entirely sure what Jonny was going to be doing, but he's ended up going out with his family, so which was really important for him and his family. So yeah, so it's slightly hastily arranged, but yeah. So I'm here basically to answer your questions to do with songwriting, arranging, composing, and harmony, music theory, music history, any of that fun stuff. And we can do some demonstrations over here on this guy, and we can have it in Fender Rhodes mode, but we could also have it in Steinway Concert Grand mode if you want. it's up to you. And I think that clipped. Yes, it did. Let me just try that again. There we go. Alrighty, so yes, I'm here for your questions. Get them going in the chat just now, and we'll work our way through as many as we can get through in the next roughly hour-ish, depending upon how many questions we have. If we have tons of questions piling in and more people coming in, we've got 23 people in here now. The more people and the more questions we get, I'll extend the show if it's really worth doing, if you guys are up for it. But if not, we will have it at exactly the hour. So let me know what you guys want to do. Get your questions in the chat. Let's see. First of all, I'm going to see who is in the chat and who is first. And it was my good friend, Michael at Music to Motion, who says, I guess I'm early. Yes, you were. You were about 20 minutes or so early. And Marcos over in Brazil is here. John Lake is here. Ounce Media is here, of course, because he is the sponsor of Home Studio Trainer. Just so that you are fully aware, for full disclosure, he is not the sponsor of Jonny Lipsham Studios, but he is the sponsor of Home Studio Trainer. And as much as I work with Jonny pretty closely, and you know, he would consider me as much a part of Home Studio Trainer as he is. Jonny Lipsham Studios has no affiliation with Ounce Media. So just so that you know, for full disclosure, I can't even say that word. Disclosure. But yes, Louis at Ounce Media is awesome. And I'm very glad that he is sponsoring Home Studio Trainer. So let's see, who else do we have? Going down the chat here, because you guys were chatting away before we started the show. Billy Morgan is here as well. Ironweed Studios is here. And we got Don Oliver here. Hello, Don. I don't think I've seen your name before. You might be familiar to Home Studio Trainer, but I think this is the first time you've been on my show. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you haven't subscribed already, Don, please go hit that subscribe button over there and hit that notification bell and select all notifications. And then, you know, you'll find out more about what I do here, because you'll get to see more of my videos and more shows like this one, if you like this one. Let's see. Who else? Mika Han is here. It's nice talking to you on the Zoom call that Mike does. That was very cool talking to you there. We had some good discussion. Mark Hosley. Welcome, Mark. Good to see you. And who else do we have? Tim Talks Audio is here. My good friend, very dear friend, Tim Flansbaum is here. He is awesome. Go check out his channel if you have not done so already. He makes some absolutely epic videos, and he does live streams of his own. And he is extremely good, and his content rocks. So if you want to get to know mixing, mastering, Studio One, go dig his stuff, because it really is extremely cool. We are very glad to have him making content as well. And Lollipop Guild is here. It's nice to talk to you as well the other day. And Tony here is here as well. Tony Stringer and Viola Bologna as well. I'm going to get to your question in a minute. If you have questions for me, please do type at then Jonny Lipsham Studios. That way it will highlight my name in red, and I know that you are asking a question and you're not just kind of chatting. So if you have not done that with a question yet, then please do so. I know it's a bit of a pain in the butt, but you can probably copy paste your original question and just stick at Jonny Lipsham Studios at the start. That would help me a lot, and that would help me in the chat set apart what's a question and what's just general chat. That would help me a lot, so please can you do that, everybody? I would appreciate it. But I'm going to scroll back up now and see if I can find some questions. Michael says that he collabed on a reggae thing and it got accepted. Cool. Okay, well that's exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that. Tim says, talk about your vocal chain like we were just talking about on Facebook. Yes, we were just talking about that on Facebook, weren't we? I have to go back and remember what I said. Oh yes, I can tell you exactly what I do for when I am mixing vocals. If I were only to use what is native to Studio One, this is what I do, and certainly since we have the Fat Channel and the Fat Channel collection and all of that available to us, this is what I do. I start with the new style EQ going into the LA2A style compressor. That's kind of the silvery tube compressor. And then I have another instance of Fat Channel after it, and this time I have the black compressor, which is the 1176 style compressor. And then sometimes, but not always, that will go into another EQ just to kind of clean things up. And that will be and sweeten things and that kind of thing. And that will be the Pultec style EQ, the one with the big black knobs. Because I love that EQ. I just love how simple it is. And how easy it is to get a great sound out of it. And then I will send that to a bus channel. And usually I have two vocal channels because for lead vocals. I'll have a single lead and then I'll have a double lead, which is basically singing the same thing twice. And both of those will go to the same bus and they will largely have the same EQ and compression on them. And then, as I say, that goes to a vocal bus, and on that vocal bus I would have an analog delay. I love the analog delay, especially with the new state space modeled drive section, which just sounds sweet. So I use that, and then that, because it's a bus channel, I can send that to a reverb. So I would use room reverb on the plate setting, just to give it just a hint of reverb. I don't use a lot of reverb. I know that there are other mix engineers and recording engineers that swear by lots of reverb. I'm not one of those guys. I like things to be pretty dry. And if I need some ambient effects, I'll use delays. Different types of delays. So I will mix them up. So I will have a slapback delay sometimes going into a much longer ping pong delay. I quite often do that. Depends on the style of music, but for kind of more kind of jazz orientated stuff, you know, then that's I kind of do the vocal chain thing that I've just set out with the analog delay on a ping pong setting going into the plate reverb, just a hair of plate reverb. But for something that's a little bit more up tempo, maybe a little bit more kind of shuffle blues orientated, then I'll use a slapback delay going into, again, another ping pong delay that is maybe at a dotted eighth note, so it's kind of asymmetrical rhythmically. I love delays that are not symmetrical. I know that there are some people, they like it to be eighth note here, or quarter note here, quarter note here, quarter note here. I don't like that. I like it to be asymmetrical, so that it's going across the beat and across the bar line. Those are just the kind of ambient effects that I like. And they've kind of, over the years, become my kind of signature sound. So that's what I do when I'm mixing vocals. For background vocals, I don't do the same. I do completely different, in actual fact. I would use more reverb, because the cool thing about reverb is it tends to set things further back in the mix. So I can use reverb to control the kind of three-dimensional aspect of where I'm putting my backing vocals, so I can have them tucked just behind the two lead vocals. So the two lead vocals are nice and up front and a little bit on the drier side, and then the wetter background vocals that maybe don't have quite so much sparkle and sheen to them, they're maybe a little bit darker in terms of, tonal coloring. So maybe not quite so much high end, maybe a little bit on the thinner side as well. So so maybe I'll do a little bit more high pass and low pass filtering on backing vocals than I would on a lead vocal. But yeah, there's kind of what I do. So I hope that answers that for you, Tim. But it's a great question. Viola has not put the at Jonny Lipsham Studios, but fortunately it's the next question directly after Tim's. So Viola says, what do you do to spice it up when you feel like you've just been writing the same chords? Great question. I usually just try some different sounds. I will try changing things up. So if I'm just using C, A minor, D minor 7, G7, that gets a little bit stale after a while. So I'll maybe spice that up a little bit. Just a little bit. Depends on the context and the style of the music, obviously, but there's little things you can do. Like you can go C, and instead of going A minor, you could go C, and then you could go A7 augmented. So you've got that sharp 5 in there. D minor, and then instead of G7, I might go G7 flat 9. Just to add that little bit of wistfulness. It's a nice kind of wistful, melancholic little chord. Just to give it a different shade. So C, A7 sharp 5, D minor, G7 or G13 flat 9, back to my C. Or I might try and avoid those kind of more traditional 1-6-2-5 relationships, and I might do what musicologists would call substitution. So I'd replace one chord for another. So instead of maybe that A7 sharp 5 that I talked about, maybe I'll use E flat 7, because that leads nice and directly to that D minor chord. And maybe I'll make that a D minor 9 instead. Nicer voice leading. So go back to my first chord. Let's change that plain Jane C into a C major 7. There's my E flat 7 chord, E flat 9 chord, D minor 9. And then instead of just staying on the G, I might go G to D flat 7. And already you've just by adding 2 little chromatic passing chords that don't belong to the key, you've created something that sounds great. And then maybe we'll go to the A minor a little bit more permanently. C major, E7 sharp 9, A minor, and then G11, so kind of F major over G. Background again. Turn that into a B flat 7. And then let's say we want to change key for a middle section. So now I'm in the key of F. G over F, C over E, E flat major 7, B flat over D, E flat over D flat, D minor, G7, back to the C again. So what I'm doing there, I mean, I kind of extended that out a little bit more, kind of just improvising that, and just seeing where that idea would take me. Once I went to F, I thought, you know what, I can stay on that F, just build up the tension a little bit, and then that will resolve down to C over E, which is basically the C major chords, first inversion rather, with the third in the bass. And then I thought I can slide that down a half step. And then I can go down again, B flat over D, go down again with the bass note. And then... So I've kind of drifted away, and then I'm just using a 2-5-1 in C major, so D minor, G7 to get back to C major. And then I'm just using a bunch of passing chords, basically just to kind of get me there, by making the bass descend chromatically, and then just changing the chords on the top. And just finding chords that have nearest notes. So if I'm trying to keep the melody at the top, so there's my F major 7. And I'm bringing that melody note down. And then back up again. And so that's how I'm going about it, is just kind of using voice leading to make it interesting and provide just some different colors and take the listener's ear on a bit of a journey. So you use some chords that maybe they don't necessarily expect, but the reason why all of that works is because the melody is kept on the top, and that's where you're anchoring your listener's ear. Wait, hang on. And I've kept a nice little melody going, whilst the chord changes underneath are just different colors. So I hope that kind of answers your question in a very lengthy and roundabout way. Let's see. John says, do you like the idea of Jonny Guy showcasing original music on Fridays? Yeah, it's very much his idea. It's what he wants to do. If you know, folks that are subscribing to his channel like that idea, then I think that's great. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see the metrics on it and see, you know, how many people submit new songs or what have you to it. And it'll be interesting to see, you know, what gets submitted. And I like listening to new artists who are writing their own material and hopefully learning from both me and Jonny. And applying some of the techniques that we teach, particularly on shows like this one and the other one that I do on Sundays, and also when Jonny and I are both working together on Songwriting Simplified. I hope that what we're teaching you helps you to write your songs and then, you know, have the confidence to submit them, because I think that's great. Okay. I'm going down. I'm not seeing any more questions, which is a shame. I like questions. Mika, that's very funny. Expect some flat fives and dominant fifths if you invite Jonny Lipsham. Flat fives, I have to admit, I did stick a couple in there. What Mika's referring to is the substitution technique that I put into practice there, where I took the A7 and turned it into an E flat 7, and it does exactly the same job, which is what you would do when you're substituting one thing for another. Like, for example, you know, for people who have celiac disease, for example, they can't have anything with gluten in it, so you have to substitute other ingredients that don't contain any gluten or have not been anywhere near any gluten, and, you know, make them do the same job. So essentially that's what we're doing here in a musical way. We're taking one chord and saying, hey, could you do the same job as this other chord and just give it a slightly different flavor? And that chord goes, sure, absolutely. But the way to make it work, and I've talked about this a little bit before, is that the chord that you're going to use to substitute needs to have some commonalities. So in the case of E flat 7, it shares 2 notes in common with A7. And they're the exact same 2 notes. It's just that in the context of E flat, the 2 notes function in a different way, but they are the same notes. They make the same sound. So A7 has an A in it. It also has a C sharp in it. And it also has a G. Fundamentally, those are the only notes you need to make an A7 chord. In fact, to make any dominant 7 chord, those are the only notes you need. Now, if I were to take my fingers off the piano and go, what do I need therefore now that we know that we need a 3rd, a 7th, and a root to make an E flat 7 chord? I'll show you. We need a root. We need a 3rd. And we need the 7th. But look what happens. If I take that root away, we've got the G and the C sharp, which came from the A7 chord. They are exactly the same 2 notes. I'm changing the bass note, and what happens is these 2 notes here change their roles, but they sound exactly the same. So in an A7 chord, the C sharp is the major 3rd, and the G is the 7th of the chord. And what this wants to do is this wants to resolve this way. Right? So it wants to go to D. 5, 1, right? But when I change the bass note to the E flat and play those same 2 notes, now the note G that was the 7th is now the 3rd, and the note that was the 3rd is now the 7th. So they've swapped roles, but they still resolve in the same way. Watch this. Does exactly the same job. And that's why it works. So if you're feeling particularly jazzy for some inexplicable reason, unless you're a jazz guy like I am, and you want to go E minor 7, so you're going to go E minor 7, A7, D. That is a 2-5-1. Lots and lots of pop songs have been written just using those chords, right? But let's say you want to make it a little bit more spicy, but do the same thing. You can go E minor, E flat 7, D. And it'll do the same thing. And that's how tritonal substitution works. We call it tritonal because the interval between the A in the A7 and the E flat is a tritone. That's 3 whole tones. A, B, C sharp, D sharp or E flat. It's an interval of a whole tone. 3 whole tones. And we call that a tritone, which is why I refer to it as tritonal substitution. And that's how it works. And you can use that whether you're into jazz or if you're into rock or you're into prog rock or you're writing, neoclassical music, you can still make use of tritonal substitution. Even if you are writing neoclassical music or neo-romantic music, if you're writing neo-romantic or neo-impressionist, then listen to a lot of Debussy and Ravel and people like that, because particularly Ravel uses a lot of parallel ninths and he uses a lot of tritonal substitutions. Does it all the time. Which is kind of how it found its way into jazz, by the way, because people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie in 1941-42, they were listening to people like Ravel and Berlioz and Schoenberg and Ravel, and they were listening to all of these people and going, hey, these harmonic devices are really, really cool. Why can't we just appropriate them and bring them into our music, into jazz? So they did. And that's how bebop was born, fundamentally. Let's see. I'm looking for questions, not seeing any more questions. So we might have to end the show very shortly if we don't have any more questions. But Viola, you're welcome. I'm hoping that helped. John Edgar says, anything you care to say about orchestration? For example, how does an orchestrator's role differ from that of a composer collaborating together? Great question. An orchestrator is somebody who takes the, particularly in the film score realm, the orchestrator will take the piano reduction of the compositional material and effectively orchestrate it for the orchestra. So give different parts to the different sections of the orchestra. And they'll do some harmonization work. Orchestrators work fairly closely with the composer to make sure that the sound that the orchestrator is giving to the orchestra is what the composer is intending, what's in his or her mind. Sometimes, particularly in the case of people like the late James Horner or David Arnold, who's written some of the Bond scores, and he's written some of the Pirates of the Caribbean scores, he's written some of the Lord of the Rings scores. He works with an orchestrator, and the orchestrator harmonizes and, basically puts flesh and bones onto the compositional material. And I know the guy, actually, who was David Arnold's orchestrator for some of the Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean films. Because he's a personal friend of mine, and he kind of told me how it all works, how closely he works with David Arnold. But yeah, it's a pretty tight-knit thing that they do. And sometimes the orchestrator will create some actual compositional material, just in small little parts, little passing parts here, passing chord there, a small little counter melody here, a small little counter melody there, just to kind of fill things out a bit. But yeah, orchestration is hard. You have to have a good grasp of orchestral, arranging orchestral harmony, understanding of how how the rules the rules of basic musicology work. It's not something I do a lot of. I don't do a lot of orchestrations for people. I do write for orchestras. I have written for orchestras. So I tend to, the way I compose is quite unique, I think. I think it's unique. Because I have the full thing fully realized in my head. I already know what it sounds like. So the challenge for me is getting what is in my head into software like Notion to kind of get all the orchestrations worked out there. But because I have the whole thing fully realized in my head, I know that it's orchestrated already. I already know which section of the orchestra needs what parts, or what parts of the chord, or, you know, maybe they might superimpose one chord on top of another. Maybe I'll have the woodwinds playing a B flat major 7 chord, whilst the lower woodwinds and some of the lower brass are playing a G major 7 chord, for example. I've done things like that. And they sound a little bit odd, but they do work when you voice them correctly. So you're avoiding all of the clashing points within those 2 chords that there could be. And it's fun. It's fun to do that. So yeah, orchestration is an interesting role. Like I say, I don't really do it very much. I'm just replying to somebody, sorry. Because somebody's just messaged me. So yeah, that's kind of how I see the role of the orchestrator. And, you know, that, as I say, my close personal friend, Stu Kennedy, has worked with David Arnold, and that was kind of the way he told me how it worked with him. So I hope that kind of helps. Ski Jumps is here, awesome. Viola asks, what do you do to spark your creativity when you have no ideas, but you have a deadline? Usually it's the deadline itself that sparks the creativity, to be honest. There is nothing like a deadline to make your brain work faster, more intuitively, and harder than you ever thought possible. You know, sometimes you are there and you know you have a deadline and you're staring at a blank score on your screen in Notion, or you're standing, you know, you have a completely blank Studio One screen and you're just going, okay, where do I start? And it's at that point I go back to the brief, if I have one. If I've been given a brief, I go back and I read through it and I reread it several times, and I will almost meditate on the brief and think quite deeply about the brief and start thinking about the kind of sounds that the brief itself is evoking. Sometimes that will help. If I have been, you know, if I don't have a brief and they say, hey, this is you know, the titles to, because I get to do this quite a lot for student films in particular, where I get to either do the whole score for a student film, and they tend to be only like 15 minutes long, or they'll ask me to do the main titles. And I don't get a lot of, sometimes I get a very detailed brief, sometimes I don't. For the ones that I don't get a detailed brief, usually I get what the kind of style of the film is, and then I go from there, based on film scores that I've heard before, films in a similar style and similar genre, and I can dig from that material. And if that means I need to go and pull out from my CD collection or my MP3 collection, because I have a lot of film scores on my collections, because it's helpful to have that kind of stuff, because you just never know when you're going to need it, especially if they've given you a pretty much blank canvas and said, hey, it's a World War II film. And that's all they've told you. It's a 15-minute World War II film. You don't really know anything about the plot. You don't really know anything about the characters. You don't really know anything about the storyline or anything like that. I'm expected to write the main titles. They've given me the title, and it's set in World War II, occupied France, for example. And that's all I've got. Okay, it's World War II. It's a war movie. Great. And it's in occupied France. So I'm dealing with occupation. Occupation is tense. So I'm going to use things that are dark sounding, and I'm going to use harmony that is tense. And I'm going to use melody lines that are not necessarily sweeping. I'm going to use melody lines that are angular, that are going to go in unexpected directions. I'll maybe make use of things like whole tone scale. I'll maybe make use of things like a 12 note row system, like Schoenberg, for example. And or I will develop something out of I'll base everything out of the diminished whole tone scale and make the whole thing just like a modal piece based out of that scale. The melody is derived from that. All of the harmony is derived from that scale. And it's war, so it's going to be vaguely militaristic. So I will have lots of percussion involved, and I'll probably have a snare drum playing some rudimental stuff, and I'll have bass drum, I'll have cymbals. It's going to sound militaristic. There's probably going to be a very strong sense of pulse and drive to it. See, already from that title and the vague setting, even though they've not given me any details of what they really want, I already intuitively understand what it needs. And then I'll go and maybe listen to my favorite World War II film scores, like Band of Brothers by Michael Kamen. What a beautiful score that is. Or I'll listen to, The Longest Day. That's another World War II film that I really like. Let me see. The opening titles to Saving Private Ryan is another classic. And so I'm already straight in the genre, and already I'm inspired because I've started thinking about the kind of sounds that I can create. So I will start experimenting. And from the experimentations, I end up with a sketch of this piece that's got to be like 7 or 8, because the film is short, it's only 15 minutes, so my main titles is only going to be 90 seconds long. So, I already know that because it's a student film. I know the brief for a student film is 15 minutes long, therefore my titles has to be 90 seconds long. So I know that from experience. So that kind of helps. So yeah, I hope some of that answers that question, because that is a great question. Working under a deadline, you have to use what you've been given by the people that by your clients to derive what you're going to do. Especially if they're giving you something very, very vague. You have to draw on experience. And if you don't have experience, then you're going to have to draw on other people's experience. And that's where, we talk often in a mixing context, we talk about reference tracks and those kind of things. Well, kind of pulling from another film score is a good thing to do, because that's your reference material. You start looking at sounds like that. I mean, I know John Williams, when he was writing the score to Star Wars, the very first of the original trilogy, he was already thinking militaristic. He was very inspired by Holst and Gustav Holst's The Planet Suite, and a lot of that kind of, particularly Mars, the very first part of that 9-part suite, is very dark, militaristic, and there's lots of aggression, there's lots of dissonance, and you hear a lot of that going on, particularly when, Darth Vader is on the scene, or, there's something that the Empire is doing. You hear that darkness, and then it's contrasted with Luke's theme that he develops. The way John Williams works is fantastic, because he gives each character in the film its own little musical motif. So Han Solo has one, Luke Skywalker has one, Obi-Wan Kenobi has one. And the cool thing about Luke Skywalker's theme is that Luke Skywalker's theme also has little hints of Darth Vader's theme in it as well, because it hints kind of in a portental way at that relationship between Vader as the father and Skywalker as the son, and that they are darkness and light. And it's brilliant the way he does it. So there you go. Long way to answer a short question, but I seem to be good at that tonight. But yeah, deadlines will get you going for sure. Ski Jump Toes says, which orchestral scores have you written for? Would love to hear them. I wrote some scores when I was at university, because when I was at university I was studying jazz composition, and I wrote a piece that featured my quartet with the university big band and the university orchestra together. So it was like this massive epic thing with so you had the 21 musicians of the big band plus my quartet plus the 80 other musicians that made up the university symphony orchestra. And that was pretty big. And I may, at that point, being only 18, 19 years old, might have bitten off a little bit more than I could chew. But as I say, I already knew how it sounded in my head. The challenge was, I mean, this predates notation software, so I was having to write it all out by hand, which actually, at that point, was actually easier than doing it in notation on on computer software, because I was just, I could literally just fly around the score with my pencil and go, okay, I'm giving this theme over. Okay, so my flute has this theme here. Great, that's going to be harmonized by this clarinet here. Perfect. Now that is going to be that melody is going to be picked up by the oboe, and is going to be harmonized by the first and second violins with the viola picking up the counter melody from earlier. And all of that is going to be underpinned by the bassoons, the bass clarinets, and the double basses in unison, stating this much slower half-time theme that runs under the whole thing. And then I'm going to bring the timpani in to build a little bit of tension, just playing very softly. And then we have a little snare drum roll, which dies away into nothing. And, that's how I was doing it. I was doing this all by hand because that was, it's there in my head. To this day, all of these years later, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago that was because it's embarrassing how long ago that was. But all of those years later, and that score is still fully realized in my head. And as I'm talking to you, I can literally hear it playing in my head. And, as I was saying, about writing these things out, that's exactly how I did it all of those years ago. So in some respects, it was easier to do with a pencil and a sheet of paper rather than doing it in notation on score software like Notion that we have now. That's not to say Notion is bad. Notion is great. Notion is fantastic. Gets my ideas down pretty darn fast, and then I get to hear back what it already sounds like using orchestral samples, because the samples for Notion are the London Symphony Orchestra recorded at Abbey Road Studios in London. So there you go. I hope that answers that question. John Egger says, that discourse on writing music from a limited brief under deadline was worth the price of admission to the live stream tonight. You're welcome, John. I'm glad. Yeah, I have a lot of experience of that. Ski Jump doesn't speak English very well, so I believe it is a translation issue. Oh, right, okay. What color is the middle of an egg? Yellow? I don't know. Ironweed, that's just far too funny. Music to Motion, send me the link and I'll put it in the chat. Wah, wah, wah. Okay, the whole egg thing is getting a little bit weird now. I thought I was the weird one. Not the Chosen says, I am what is known as a blagger. I can record my band, but I have to send to friend for mixing and master, so when you have questions. No, questions are fine. Absolutely. This is what this show is all about. This show is all about questions. So, don't feel that you can't. I'm trying to see what else we have. Okay. And I think that was the link. It was the link. It was the link, and I'm copying that link. And I'm going to put it in the chat. I don't know why. Oh, I can't do it like that. I cannot do it like that. It is way too long. Hang on. Excuse me, snorting. How did I do this last time? Let's do that. Then let's do that. There we go. Control copy that. There we go. That works. That works. And I'm going to close that. Perfecto. Oh, okay. I get you, Mike. We're talking about the understanding the language and culture barriers that get misunderstood. Yeah, happens all too often. Happens all too often. And actually, sometimes I get briefs in foreign languages and then I have to go and translate them in Google Translate. And sometimes Google Translate does no better. Which reminds me, if you are a subscriber to the Personas newsletter, you may have seen a blog article referred to in that newsletter by Craig Anderton about making speech software sing inside of Studio One. It is very, very cool. If you don't have a singer and you want to use something like the Google Translate person to sing your song for you, you can. And it works. There's one small caveat, and that is you need to be able to get the audio from Google Translate or whatever it is, or whatever speech to text to speech that you're going to use. You need to be able to get that audio into Studio One somehow. Now, there are some text-to-speech software that you can get where you can actually download the MP3 of the speech, in which case the first part of the problem is solved. But if you're going to use Google Translate, then you're going to have to find a way to record your system audio into Studio One. Now, with a loopback-enabled device, like the Studio 1824, the Studio 1810, or the 6.8, or the 2.4, or something like that, you can do that very, very easily. But yeah, as I say, it's fun. And then what you do is you use Melodyne to pitch the words around. And I'm going to do it, and I'm probably going to present the results on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. So if you are interested in that idea, and if you're interested in having fun with it, go try it out for yourselves. I'm going to try it out for myself, and I'm going to present my results on Sunday's show. So if you're not a subscriber to the Personas newsletter, you really should, because you get fun stuff like that. Craig Anderton comes up with stuff I have never even thought of before. You know, just a way to do something in Studio One that I have never thought of before. And I just go, oh, I did not know you could do that. I have done that so many times. And he must just spend all his time tinkering with Studio One, coming up with weird and wacky ways to make things work. So yeah, go check that out. Ski Jump Toes, did you see this? The company who Guy Michael Moore works for, they send students out to conduct an orchestra with their scores they've written at top locations. I have seen that. Yeah, I've conducted orchestras before. I had to do that at university. I had to conduct the piece that I wrote that I talked about. I had to conduct that. That was nerve-wracking because I was also the drummer in the quartet. So I was having to play drums and conduct, play drums and conduct all at the same time. It was hilarious. I don't recommend doing something like that for yourselves. I do recommend learning how to conduct, actually. And if you do get a chance to do it in front of an audience, with an orchestra, do it. It is life-changing, actually. It certainly was for me. One of the pieces I had to conduct for to pass my conducting aspect of my composition course was I had to conduct. I was assigned the final part of Hulse the Planets, which is called Neptune. And the cool thing about Neptune is it feels like there is no sense of time in it whatsoever. If you've ever heard it, it's a very beautiful, calming, and relaxing piece of music, and everything moves so kind of slowly, and it's kind of kaleidoscopic the way sounds just shift about, orchestration just shifts about, and different colors emerge, and then they go away, and then something else comes in. It's a very, very beautiful piece, and it's in 5/4, just like the first piece, Mars, which is kind of like the bringer of war, the aggressor, and then you've got Neptune at the end, kind of like the bookends of the whole work. And it's really hard to conduct. Both are actually really hard to conduct, but Neptune is particularly hard to conduct because so little goes on, and you can get lost in the score so easily. But there's lots of things that you have to be aware of, like cueing different instruments, making sure that, you know, the oboe that gets to play theme B, and I think it's about the 54th bar, you have to make sure that that oboe soloist comes through, because if that oboe soloist does not come through, then the two clarinets, the bassoon in the upper register that harmonize that in the response to it won't make any sense. So if the oboist misses their cue, or you don't give the cue, what happens next for the next 8 bars makes zero sense. So you have to be completely on your toes, and it's very tricky to do. But I would recommend definitely conducting with an orchestra. You will love it. And on that note, folks, we are going to finish there, because we have overrun a little bit, which is fine because I needed to pee, so I think that's a good reason to overrun a little bit. So I will see you guys on Sunday for Sunday Night Live, back here on this channel, same time, 6 p.m. Central, midnight British Summer Time, 1 a.m. Central European Time, and it will be lunchtime in Australia, but that's okay. If you fancy a lunchtime show and you are in Australia, then please do drop in. Until then, folks, I wish you all a very good night. Good night.